This is Carolina Business Review. Major support provided by High Point University, the premier life skills university focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
It is not the last stretch, but we are approaching the back straightaway, so to speak, of our high season of summer travel and vacations for sure. Thank you for supporting the most widely watched dialogue on Carolina business and public policy. I am Chris William, and because of summer, it may still be a little slow around town these days, but it doesn't really mean that there aren't important things to talk about, and we will. We will unpack these things with our expert panel, and later on, the Chief Executive Officer of the country's second largest credit union, Leigh Brady, from North Carolina's State Employee Credit Union. Stay with us.
Major funding also by Foundation for the Carolinas, a catalyst for philanthropy and driver of civic engagement, helping individuals, nonprofits, and companies bring their charitable visions to life. Truliant Federal Credit Union, proudly serving the Carolinas since 1952 by focusing on what truly matters, our members' financial success. Welcome to Brighter Banking. And Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation on which our communities improve and grow. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Vicki Lee Parker High from the North Carolina Sustainable Business Council, Susie Shannon of the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, and special guest, Leigh Brady, CEO of State Employees Credit Union.
Hello, welcome to our program. You know, a point of personal preference. Thank you both for driving in, because you always do. Coming in from the middle of the state, and coming up from South Carolina. We don't take it lightly. We appreciate that kind of commitment. So thank you both. I appreciate that.
Our pleasure.
Happy to be here.
Happy summer. We're still summer. People are still vacationing. You know, the beaches are packed. But Vicki, Leigh, let's zoom out a little bit. You know, tariffs have waned and ebbed and flowed. What kind of anxiety is there about tariffs, and how much of the anxiety is actual manifest?
Well, as you know, there's so many moving variables right now, and that creates uncertainty. And when you're running a business, you know, you have enough things to deal with on a normal day and running your business. You don't really want these added variables out there that you don't know what's going to happen. You spent years, some businesses decades, to build up supply chains, and you know they've nurtured those supply chains, and they know where things are coming from. And now there's all this uncertainty around it. So you know some things are stable, and then the next day they're not. So I think the anxiety is around a lot of the unknowns that are still swarming around this. I think initially we heard high numbers when the tariffs were going to be a certain percentage. That hasn't manifested, so that has alleviated in one respect, some regards, that it's not as high as what was initially what people were thinking. However, all the uncertainty, it is still creating a lot of angst. You
know, we've heard from some folks that said the same thing, but they've also said, but our inventory in our supply chains have been able to give us a buffer, so we're not worried about it now. Are you hearing that, or?
For now, but again, yeah, when you, as a business, you're still looking out 2, 3, 5 years. And right now, what does that look like? And some people say, well, let's see what happens, you're still trying to plan, but again, there are just so many unknowns and so many things that are unpredictable right now. So yeah, it may not affect you today, but then there's some people who got through it. They had to pay the tariffs. I mean, some of our businesses had to pay as much as $10,000 to get some of that equipment in hand. So, they were able to do it the first round, but are you going to be able to withstand that if there's a second wave?
Susie, the animal spirits of the fear around tariffs and the manifestation, same question. How do you look at that?
Yeah, so when you look at economic engines like advanced manufacturing that rely heavily on just-in-time inventory models, right? So they're not going to be pulling on that inventory, those component parts until they actually need them. But I think, similar to what Vicki Leigh said, that companies, but manufacturers, tier one suppliers anticipated what was coming, sort of looking in the crystal ball and seeing it pretty crystallized, what was coming, and so they sort of pre-ordered, which was great for logistics and moving freight, right? It was a kind of a boon to them for a while to be moving very quickly and moving a lot of volume. But over time, that resiliency is going to start to break down, and I think you're going to see shifts in how they may have to open up new warehousing, new distribution centers, keep them closer in, and sort of add that buffer, added buffer.
Is there that flexibility in the leadership that you talk to about that? Can they, not to overuse this term, but can they pivot that quickly for that?
Some can pivot and absorb. Some not so much. I think probably some of those smaller, medium-sized firms are going to feel the biggest punch on it.
We've heard this term from an economist recently, Vicki Leigh, and the term is low hire, low fire, and they're talking about jobs. That there's low hiring, but there's low firing, and we got a recent, the most recent, about a week ago now, number was slower job growth, but still job growth. Does that square with you? Is that what you see?
Yeah, and I think I saw even this morning where they're looking at revising some of the job growth, the previous reports. So, yeah, I mean, we have to remember, before heading into the world of tariffs and everything, we had a strong economy. So there was still a strong wind at our back initially, and so we're still riding on some of that. So we have, again, these two layers going on, but we did have a pretty robust economy with AI growing, a lot of things going on in the digital world. So there are a lot of industries that are still pushing, forward fairly strongly. So we still have that wave that we're riding, as well as riding this undercurrent, is how I kind of look at it, with what's going to happen with the tariff, with all these other things. So with the jobs, I look at it that way. You still got the strong economy, so that's still growing, but then you got all this other anxiety underbedding that that are going to make those job numbers mixed.
So the jobs in South Carolina, how do you tease out the difference between, as I just called it, low hire, low fire, and really the kind of jobs that are needed for things like Scout Motors is just one of them. The upstate, and it doesn't even include the upstate and what's going on in the low country. So do those numbers distort the hiring?
So it's interesting. So our South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce just put out the June jobs report. And I love the characterization of hot temperature, hot job market. Where we tended to see the growth was in the services sector over the goods sector, which I think is pretty common, that you're seeing throughout the Southeast as well. But where we saw the growth was on the private sector side. So I think we're going to see kind of a diminishing number on the public sector jobs, the federal jobs with some of the federal employee cuts, but even some of the state, local government jobs as well, as some of that downshifting of public funding begins to happen from the downstream from DC. But, construction is really big. And so when you talk about recruiting companies like a Scout Motors, where you're going to see a lot of new housing permits, a lot of big thousands at a chunk of housing starts, you're going to see those construction jobs kind of go up. So I think you're going to kind of see this wave where it's going to vacillate maybe away from some of the goods dominant job to some of the services sector jobs.
Let me leverage off something that Susie just said, Vicki Leigh, and that's this hot temperature in jobs, hot temperature, in temperature itself.
Last time I was here, it was snowing.
Was it that long ago?
Just a few months.
Okay,
but yeah,
wow. So talk about hot. North Carolina, third time in 4 years, and I think that's the first time that's happened in as long as CNBC's been ranking the states for business. North Carolina's been number one again in the most recent temperature ranking, if you will. Is there a dark side of that, though? The kind of growth that comes on the backside of that?
Yeah, it definitely brings us challenges. Yeah, you know, you see that ranking and you're like, yes, but yeah, you still have to look at the housing costs. With that ranking, the housing costs are continuing to go up. So those who are local are seeing that challenge and are facing that challenge. A lot of the jobs that we are seeing created are people who are moving there. We still have thousands of people that move in, into at least our particular area every day. So it is bringing a lot of challenges, and it's also the challenge of trying to maintain that country feel, that maintain the green, the trees, and finding that balance. So a lot of people are concerned about they're forests that are just were there one day and they're gone the next, and so it does bring a lot of challenges with that growth. So that number is great to see, and that ranking is great to see, but yes, there's a lot in the background that people are having to deal with.
Yeah, I wish we had more time to dive into that. Please stay with us. We're going to bring our guest on. Before we do that, coming up on this program again, Tom Barkin is the president of the Richmond Federal Reserve. Tom has been around the block now for a while and knows a little bit about how fiscal policy and monetary policy certainly works. We will again unpack things with President Barkin. Also coming up on the program, College of Charleston President Dr. Andrew Sue will also be joining us once again. More and more you hear the term banking when referring to credit unions. However, while they both offer essentially financial services, there are fundamental differences between things like ownership, purpose, approach to rates, fees, and community involvement between banks and credit unions. We welcome now the State Employee Credit Union Chief Executive Officer. We welcome Leigh Brady, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm thinking so much about the difference between banking and credit unions. Leigh, you sit on top of the second largest credit union in this country. I mean, it's a massive credit union. When you talk to your members, which are about 2.8 million, and coming off the dialogue we just had, do you hear anxiety? Do you hear concern? Do you hear, I'm not worried about it? What are you hearing?
Well, of course, we hear concerns all the time. So, but really from the economic side of things, I think that what we see, and we look at factors like are deposits still coming in, are people still taking out loans? And both of those things are still happening at our credit union. So while our membership has also ticked up, we are this anomaly, and not everybody can join our credit union. So we just cussed the 2.9 million. So we'll probably in about 6 months, I think, probably hit 3 million members. But most of that is coming from family. And I think that they are seeing the value. So when you talk economy, you are looking at where can I get the best value? And I think that that's where credit unions are coming in, and specifically our credit union for sure.
Wait, let's dive down just a little bit. The difference between banks and credit unions can be seen, I think, in a lot of communities. Just being around them for as long as I have and everyone else has. The difference between this community involvement, that seems like that's a pretty big lever that you have.
We absolutely have that and are thrilled to have community involvement. We have branches in all 100 North Carolina counties, have 275. And then we have this unique member-funded foundation that is really our philanthropic arm for our members to give back to those communities. So our foundation, our members pay $1, a monthly maintenance fee on their checking. That $1 for 99% of those is routed to the SCCU Foundation. Over $21 million a year is given. That has been in existence since 2004, and we have just cussed probably about $320 million in giving to North Carolina communities. And that's in addition to the supply drives, but just finished that up for the governor's office as well, and toy drives and any other walks that we're doing to raise funds. So heavily involved in community efforts.
Vicki, Leigh?
It's good to meet you.
So good to meet you.
I've been following you for quite some time, so it's good to meet you in person. With our business members, I've heard them talk a little bit more about credit unions and being able to go to credit unions with their businesses. And so I'm not sure where you are with your plans, but can you talk a little bit about it? I know there are some credit unions that are starting to broaden the services for businesses, because typically credit unions have been known for individuals and for families. But what are plans or if any, to help businesses and do more for small business owners?
That's a great question, Vicki. And one of the most requested services that our members have for us right now, they want small business services. We are still a consumer-only credit union, and small business services is not on the horizon right now because we're upgrading systems. Once we do that in several years, we are going to take another look at that and plan to implement those small business services. We have so many members, specifically state employees, who retire, and they start a second career, so to speak, with a small business in mind. And they would love to have those services at state employees. We just can't offer them yet. So it's on the horizon.
Susie?
Yeah, Leigh, so you mentioned the robust engagement inside of the communities, and it certainly sounds like you've been blessed with assets to support those efforts. Certainly the Southeast region, but North Carolina, South Carolina in particular, particularly hard hit with Hurricane Helene. Just sort of curious about some of the involvement and support in those efforts.
Yeah, that's another wonderful question. And our foundation donated close to $9 million towards Hurricane Helene relief. But I'm so proud of our teams because we hit the ground running really that Friday after the storm hit. And we were doing everything from mobilizing cash, because cash was king during that time.
Sure.
And figuring out how do we get supplies where they are needed the most. So each of our branches served as collection sites. We partnered with agencies like the Salvation Army to make sure that we got those in to the communities where they were needed. And then we loaded up vans from our central locations and we took those. So even though some of our branches had no electricity, certainly no network connections, they found a way to serve members. We even had a credit union out of Tampa, Florida, that lent us a mobile ATM unit, of all things, and it had Starlink on it, and so their disaster recovery guy drove it up to us, we drove it to the mountains, and in the first weekend, distributed $70,000 in cash. So volunteering, our teams are still volunteering each and every day. And our employees, they also collected funds for their peers who were hit, because we did have employees affected as well. But super proud.
Clearly, your effectiveness in community it's a big lever for SECU. Community banks have said that's unfair, and I'm greatly overstating or understating it. But community banks said it's not fair that you have a certain tax status, and it makes it an unfair advantage for them. Has that argument gotten worse or gotten better under the current administration and in general? How do you debate against that?
Well, and obviously the big beautiful bill, they were looking for ways to pay for those continued tax cuts, right?
Right.
And Ways and Means said everything was on the table, including credit union taxation. And so it was a pretty serious issue this year. But I think that we were able to, and rightly so, demonstrate the difference of a credit union. So in terms of, it's not just giving back to the community, but we don't have shareholders. We have members, and those members own our cooperative. But the dollars that we make go back to helping our members. For instance, low fees. If you look at all of our fees across the board for state employees credit union on an annual basis, it equates to about $20 a year. And that includes that dollar. So, I mean, it is incredibly low. So credit unions are really about a different model, about giving back. I say we like to keep money in our members' pockets where it belongs, and they pay taxes on those funds that they keep in their pockets.
I'm not saying you don't do this, Leigh, because I'm
Yeah.
sure you do. How do you, as a CEO of an organization, whether it's tax status is the way it is or the way it isn't, how do you remain competitive in financial services, grow your enterprise, but still be fair to the letter of the law as the tax status of a credit union?
Yeah, I think that's focus on our growth organically and focus on sustaining and developing new relationships. So for us, I think that is what will sustain and grow our credit union. So people are looking for that local individual who, and look, digital absolutely is increasing. Technology, we are having to make enhancements in technology, but the fact is if you have an issue, you want someone to call, to talk to, or you want to go inside somewhere and solve that problem. And we deliver that when others don't always deliver that. So.
Thank you, Leigh.
Yeah, I think similar to Chris' question, because you mentioned you have these branches in the rural areas in all 100 counties, and it's sort of outside. It's like, well, how are you able to do what the big banks are not able to do? So what is kind of your special sauce? What is it that makes you able to sustain these branches in these rural communities where the big banks are pulling out?
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, I always say our people are our secret sauce. Those people live in those communities, and it is commitment of our volunteer board of directors that we remain in those communities. You're not always going to be profitable, but that is not our model. So we are a not-for-profit cooperative. So it may not be that you're profitable in this community, but someone else is sustaining that community for you. So we plan to keep all of our branches open. That is, at least under my tenure, so that is certainly the plan. In terms of long range, what's going to happen in the industry, who knows? Because a lot has changed in the financial services industry, even since COVID, from the technology side of things, from financial services providers. But in rural communities, I can tell you those are some of the busiest branches that we have. Not all of them have access to broadband in those rural areas. So that is where our focus is going to continue to be. And I think relationships, the people will certainly sustain. And family memberships have grown dramatically over the years at State Employees Credit Union.
Susie, question?
So Leigh, you mentioned technology, you mentioned the rural areas, and certainly broadband availability and the take rates, always an issue. But as we see, maybe satellite technologies, other technologies where you don't need plant in the ground, and those higher level dollar investments, what do you see on the horizon when maybe a member driving through their hometown doesn't see the marquee in the building because everything has sort of been lifted up into the cloud?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question, Susie. So we have been really building kind of some of these, what I would call ancillary services, for a long period of time. And so things like our investment services, or we have our own life insurance company, we have a property management company, we offer estate planning and trusts. So all of those things are going to help sustain. The typical transaction model may not be sustained, let's say 20 years from now. But you also have to remember that as individuals age, sometimes they are not able to do certain things as well. So you need to, what we call, meet them where they are, and maybe that's in life, and continue to offer that vast array of services. So we have what we call credit union service organizations, our QSOs, serve our members, and they serve non-members as well with those investment products. And those financial advisors, they can come in, and that's, I think, what's going to help sustain us too.
We have about a minute left. How do you leverage AI, and how early is it in the process?
Well, for us, it's fairly early, but I will tell you, I think that AI has been around a much, much longer time than people claim. I mean, the macros of years ago, that's what I might call AI too. We have just started leveraging it in our organization pretty well, but really started more from the member-facing side with voice authentication in our contact center. So you call in, and you tell the system what you're calling for, but if you agree to have your voice recorded, and then the next time you call in, within 7 seconds, we have identified that it is Chris, and we already know you've told us what you want. So that saves about, on average, 45 seconds in the member service time.
Has it resulted in, literally, this is probably not a fair question, 10 seconds, has it resulted in not hiring or layoffs at all?
Well, look, we've had a hiring freeze for quite a while.
Okay.
I actually put that back way in 22. It's critical positions only.
Okay.
And if you look at our full-time staff, we are running with about 30 more individuals.
Okay. Fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Thanks for being so
Absolutely.
game. Nice to see you. Thanks for making the trip, always, Leigh, and hope you'll come back.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Susie, thanks for driving up from Columbia.
Oh, always a pleasure.
And did you drive in from Raleighwood or did you drive in from Greensboro?
I actually came in from Asheville this
Okay,
time. I was
that's
at
good
another
too.
event. So.
Thank you. Good to see you,
Absolutely,
Vicki.
my pleasure.
Until next week, I'm Chris William. Happy weekend. Good night.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, Truliant Federal Credit Union, Foundation for the Carolinas, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, High Point University, and by viewers like you. Thank you.